Hey, you guys want to check out my new sour IPA? It's blue. Ocean water. Taste the sea. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another homebrew recipe showcase. I'm pretty stoked about this one because this is one of the weirder beers that I have ever made, but definitely also one of the cooler beers that I've ever made. Now, to be totally honest with you, this beer in its current form is a result of experimentation of lots of different things. Really what happened is I planned on doing the beer a certain way and it came out a certain way and I wasn't super happy with it, so I just added some fruit flavorings until it got to a point where I was sort of happy with it. And that's not to say that I'm only sort of happy with this beer. I do like it. I just think there's a lot more potential. I think the idea is really cool and I think that I could do more with it. With that being said, I'm gonna hop right into my recipe. I'm gonna run through it pretty quickly here, but I'm gonna put it up on the screen for you. So if you miss any of it, feel free to pause the video. Now, as I give you this recipe, one thing to keep in mind is that this was a half batch effectively. I brewed this beer as part of a split batch of IPA. And so the recipe I'm going to be giving you is for a total volume of 2.5 gallons. If you were to brew a 5-gallon batch, you would need to scale it up accordingly. Essentially just multiply everything by 2. So I know what you're thinking. You want to know why it's blue. We'll get there, I promise. I'll talk just very briefly about the water. It's important with a beer like this that you have a high chloride to sulfate ratio because you want to have a soft mouthfeel. Talked about this a little bit more in the Hazy IPA video, but really you do not want to have any sharp edges because you're going to have enough sharpness from the lactic acid that's going to build up from the sour yeast. So you don't want to have any astringency or harshness in this beer, really, because it's going to accentuate the sourness to the point where it's going to be hard to drink. So I ended up with about 150 parts per million of chloride and then about 80 parts per million of sulfate. So if you can shoot for numbers around there, I think you'll end up with a nice round mouthfeel. Now, my grain bill was pretty simple, and if you watch the video of the strawberry milkshake IPA, you're going to notice some similarities here. In my 2.5 pound batch, I went ahead and used 5 pounds of my Brewer's 2-row as my base malt. I then added 1.5 pounds of flaked oats to that grist, and then 1 pound of Brewer's white wheat. Now, this base is good for pretty much anything similar to this. It's a blank canvas by which you can put a whole bunch of garbage on, and by garbage I mean art. Not that I think art is garbage or that this beer is garbage. I should just use a different word. It's a blank canvas by which you can paint the beer that you want it to be. So like in this case, I ended up with this from that very simple grist. So there's a couple other things that I added to the boil of this beer. One was 4 ounces of dextrose. Now, it was important that I had a little bit of simple sugar in this because I used this yeast here, the Lallemand Philly Sour yeast from their Wild Brew series. This stuff is really, really cool. I'll probably make another video kind of diving in depth to what this is and what it does, but it's really cool because effectively to us as home brewers and to all brewers out there, this is a brewer's yeast, okay? This is not a bacteria pitch. This is a brewer's yeast that produces first lactic acid, and then after it's done producing lactic acid, it produces alcohol. Now, in terms of pitching rate and temperature for this yeast, there is more information on the Lallemand website, but I pitched 1 pack in a 2.5 gallon batch. They do recommend 2 packs for most 5-gallon batches, especially above, 1040 OG. So I pitched 1 pack in a 2.5 gallon batch, and then I fermented it at about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. But that being said, one of the conditions that I got from people who had used this yeast before was include a little bit of simple sugar, sucrose, dextrose, just include a simple sugar, at least a little bit of it to help this stuff get going. I guess this stuff likes the simple sugar more and will produce a little bit more lactic acid if you give it some simpler food. That being said, to the latter part of the boil, I also added 10 ounces of lactose. This is quite a bit, actually. This is more than 1 pound per 5-gallon batch. As you can tell, if you were to double this, I'd have 20 ounces of lactose, which is 1 pound and 4 ounces. So I added this later on in the process because I needed to balance out the acidity from both the sour yeast as well as the sour fruits that I used. I ended up using only like sour fruits, and it just kind of made a really harsh, sour, tart kind of beer. And so I added the lactose to bring up the sweetness and body just a little bit, and boy, it worked wonders. It did really well. This is a highly experimental style, and there's a plethora of examples out there, but you will find that a lot of sour IPAs do include lactose. It just helps to bring a balance to it. Almost gives you like a smoothie kind of thing because it also adds body to the beer, but it's really pleasant. As far as my mash goes, it was incredibly simple. I did a full volume brew in a bag mash, and I mashed it about 152 for 60 minutes. You can really do other temperatures if you'd like. I don't think it's gonna make a whole lot of difference. That's kind of just my baseline, 152 degrees Fahrenheit for 60 minutes. Now, all of these steps, depending on your efficiency, should give you an original gravity of 1075 to 1080, somewhere around there. keeping in mind that the lactose is going to keep your final gravity a little bit higher, so we should end up in the 7.5 to 8% alcohol by volume range. Now you guys know we can't talk about anything IPA, including sour IPAs, without talking about hops. I promise we will talk about why it's blue soon, but let's talk about the hops that we used. With this beer, like most New England IPA style beers, you need a very small bittering addition, if any at all. I did a 30-minute boil for this style, and I added at 30 minutes 5 grams of German Magnum hops to get me about 13 to 15 IBUs. The rest of the kettle hops were Whirlpool additions. I did a ½ ounce each of Citra and Azacca, and I Whirlpooled those at about 180 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 minutes. Now I did have a pretty rigorous dry hopping schedule for this beer. As with any, again, New England style or specialty IPA style, you do want to make sure when doing your dry hop additions that you're getting as little oxygen contact with the fermented beer as possible. My first dry hop was at high Kreuzen. I did 1 ounce of Citra and 1.5 ounces of Azacca. So after that first high Kreuzen dry hop, I removed those hops after 4 days, and then I did my fruit additions. After there was no noticeable airlock activity or activity in the fermenter, and the beer had reached its final gravity of around 1022, I went ahead and added fruit. Now, there's many options for this, and I've been experimenting, and again, this beer is a product of experimentation. So I used these Goya fruit pulp packets. These are 14 ounces each, so just under a pound each. I got passion fruit and guanabana. They're both tropical fruits, and I thought that they would work really well together. I thought these pulps, these frozen pulps I got at the grocery store, were a great way to do that instead of buying an expensive puree option. So I added 2 packs, so 28 ounces of the passion fruit pulp and 1 pack of the guanabana pulp, 14 ounces. Now with this, there was a pickup again in fermentation activity, so I waited until things kind of settled down, and again, the beer was right around 1022. I went ahead and cold crashed the batch. When the beer was cold crashed down to 36 degrees Fahrenheit, I added 1 ounce each of Amarillo and Azacca and 1.5 ounces of Citra. It was at this point that I took it upon myself to make the beer blue. I knew that I wanted to make this beer blue. I don't know why. I had the name Ocean Water in mind. I had already done the label and I really liked it. And it was in my head, I want my, sour IPA build to be blue in color. I don't know, it was crazy. So I set out to do this naturally. And I almost got there, and I'll explain what I mean. The majority of this color that you see here comes from the use of blue spirulina powder, organic 100% blue spirulina powder. Blue spirulina is a cyanobacteria. It is also commonly referred to as a superfood. A lot of people use it for health purposes. I used it to make my beer blue. The stuff is blue. I mean, it's very harsh blue. And that being said, I kind of falsely assumed that it was going to turn the beer a similar color. Some of you were a little bit ahead of me in noting that blue is a primary color. So there really is no way to mix 2 other colors and get to blue, like a perfectly clear blue. So obviously we end up with kind of a greenish hue here. That is because the beer started yellow, I added blue, and here we are at green. That being said, and I apologize for this in advance, but I would be remiss if I did not admit I did use some blue food coloring just at the very end, just to give it a little bit more blue. I wanted more, man, I'm sorry. It was too green before. It looked like swamp water instead of ocean water, and we didn't want that. So most of the color comes from the blue spirulina powder that I dissolved. I don't know, sue me, it's homebrewing. It's my beer, I'm drinking it, whatever. I'm just ashamed, that's why I'm lashing out at you. I'm not actually mad at you, okay? Now at this point, when I racked to the keg, I did taste the beer, and I didn't love it. I liked it, but I didn't love it. But I had chosen 2 pretty acidic fruits in terms of passion fruit and guanabana. They are both pretty sour, or have sour characteristics. The beer was sort of harsh tasting, and it didn't have a whole lot of fruit flavor. So I really wanted more. And that's the beauty of homebrewing, is that here I am, the beer's in the keg, it's ready to carbonate. Let's add some more flavorings. So I kind of went nuts. I experimented with this. I ended up adding the following fruit flavorings. I use these Brewer's Best Natural flavorings. These are wonderful. You can get these on Amazon. You can get them on really any major homebrew retailer. They're great because I have a bunch of them on hand, and when I have a beer like this that I think wants to be more fruity, I can just add a few and see what happens. So I ended up adding 1 ounce of mango flavoring, 1 ounce of raspberry flavoring, and then about 1.5 ounces of passion fruit extract. That's really it as far as the process goes. Again, it's a very unique, very interesting beer, but this was really fun to kind of screw around with. And I love when a beer like this is a product of experimentation. To me, that is the heart and soul of home brewing, is just when you have a beer and you're not 100% satisfied with it, so you just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I mean, this is the everything but the kitchen sink beer, and I gotta be honest with you, I like it. It's cool. I like weird beers like this, you know? If you like and enjoy, you know, more simple beers, I guess, you know, Pilsner beers and lagers and things like that, this may scare the hell out of you. And I can't blame you for that because it's scary. I mean, look at it. I had a lot of fun making this beer, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I'm really working hard to get lots of videos out for you guys and showcase more of my beers. I will link the recipe in the description below as always, so you guys can get a more clear picture of what you need to do to brew a beer like this. But I would encourage you, you know, you can keep the same base level, you can make the same base beer, you can do the same coloring type deal, but experiment with different kinds of fruits and flavorings and get a mixture that you would really like. This is good, but could be better, and I think it's important to note that about pretty much everything you brew. That being said, I am kind of stoked on it, to be honest. Still, look at it. It's super cool. It's really novel. It's not super practical to have it be this color. I think I just spit a little bit. I'm sorry if the camera picked that up. But it is cool, and it puts a smile on people's face. You know, when they see it, they pour it into a glass, and they go, wow, that's crazy that it looks like this. This is beer. You know, and to elicit those kinds of reactions from people, it makes my heart feel warm and happy. And that to me is a big part of homebrewing, is making stuff that's weird and out there and that people will look at and be like, man, I've never seen anything like that before. That's crazy. Can I try it? Thank you guys for watching this homebrew recipe showcase. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment section below. Welcome into all the new subscribers. I know I've kind of grown a little bit recently, and I'm super stoked to have you guys here. Let me know if you have any feedback or suggestions, and I will see you guys in the next video.